Paradise Lost, a modern English translation. By John Milton. Preface from Harmony. Dear listeners, in this book I have retold the legend of Paradise Lost in a modern English method, retaining, however, as far as possible, the expressions and metaphors of John Milton in his original writing. Book 1. The Argument. Invocation. This first book presents, in brief, the entire subject, man's disobedience, and the resulting loss of paradise, where he was placed. It then touches on the main cause of his fall, the serpent, or rather Satan in the serpent. Satan, rebelling against God and drawing many legions of angels to his side, was by God's command driven out of heaven with all his followers into the great deep. After this event, the poem quickly moves into the midst of things, presenting Satan and his fallen angels in hell, described not as the center, since heaven and earth might not yet be made or cursed, but as a place of utter darkness, most fittingly called chaos. Here, Satan and his angels lie on the burning lake, thunderstruck and astonished. After a while, they recover from their confusion. Satan calls upon his second in command, and they discuss their miserable fall. Satan awakens all his legions, who are also lying in the same confused state. They rise. Their numbers, battle formations, and chief leaders are named, corresponding to the idols known later in Canaan and surrounding regions. Satan addresses them, comforting them with the hope of regaining heaven, but also tells them of a new world and a new kind of creature to be created, according to an ancient prophecy or rumor in heaven. Many ancient fathers believed that angels existed long before this visible creation. To discover the truth of this prophecy and decide on a course of action, he refers to a full council. His associates' attempts are then described. Pandemonium, Satan's palace, rises, suddenly built out of the deep. The infernal peers sit in council there. End invocation. Of man's first disobedience and the consequence of that forbidden tree, whose deadly taste brought death into the world and all our suffering, along with the loss of Eden until one greater man restores us and regains the blissful place, sing, Heavenly Muse, who inspired that shepherd on the sacred mountain of Oreb, or Sinai, who first taught the chosen people how the heavens and earth arose out of chaos. Or if Zion Hill and Siloa's brook near the oracle of God delight you more, then invoke your aid to my daring song, which intends to soar above the heights of Mount Parnassus, while it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. And above all, you spirit, who prefers the upright heart and pure before all temples, instruct me, for you know, you were present from the first, and with mighty wings outspread, dove-like, you sat brooding on the vast abyss and made it fertile. Illuminate what is dark in me, raise and support what is low, that I may assert eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men in this great argument. Say first, for heaven hides nothing from your view, nor does the deep tract of hell, what caused our ancestors, highly favored in that happy state, to fall from their Creator and transgress His will for one restraint, being lords of the world otherwise. Who first seduced them to that foul revolt? It was the infernal serpent, whose deceit, stirred up by envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind. His pride had cast him out from heaven, along with all his rebel angels. Aspiring to set himself in glory above his peers, he hoped to equal the Most High, if opposed. With ambitious aim, he raised impious war in heaven and proud battle, a vain attempt. The almighty power hurled him headlong, flaming from the ethereal sky, down to bottomless perdition, to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire, who dared defy the omnipotent to arms. For 9 days and nights, he and his horrid crew lay vanquished, rolling in the fiery gulf, confounded though immortal. But his doom reserved him for more wrath, for now the thought of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him. He throws his baleful eyes around, witnessing huge affliction and dismay, mixed with obdurate pride and steadfast hate. As far as angels can see, he views the dismal situation, waste and wild, a horrible dungeon, flamed like a great furnace on all sides, yet from those flames, no light, only darkness visible, serving only to discover sights of woe, regions of sorrow, doleful shades where peace and rest never dwell. Hope never comes that comes to all, only endless torture still urges, and a fiery deluge, fed with ever-burning sulfur. unconsumed. Such a place eternal justice had prepared for those rebellious, here their prison ordained in utter darkness, and their portion set as far removed from God and light of heaven as from the center thrice to the utmost pole. Oh, how unlike the place from whence they fell! There, overwhelmed with floods and whirlwinds of tempestuous fire, he soon discerns his companions of the fall, and next to him in power and crime, known long after in Palestine, named Beelzebub, to whom the archenemy, now called Satan in heaven, began with bold words, breaking the horrid silence. If you are he, but oh, how fallen! How changed from him who, in the happy realms of light, clothed with transcendent brightness, outshone myriads though bright. If you, whom mutual league, united thoughts and counsels, equal hope and hazard in the glorious enterprise joined with me once, now misery has joined in equal ruin, into what pit you see from what height fallen, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder, and until then, who knew the force of those dire arms? Yet not for those, nor for what the potent victor in his rage can else inflict, do I repent or change, though changed in outward luster, that fixed mind, and high disdain from sense of injured merit, that with the mightiest raised me to contend, and brought along innumerable force of spirits armed, that dared dislike his reign, preferring me, opposed his utmost power with adverse power in dubious battle on the plains of heaven, and shook his throne. What though the field be lost? All is not lost, the unconquerable will, and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield, and what else is not to be overcome. That glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me. To bow and sue for grace with suppliant knee, and deify his power who, from the terror of this arm, so late doubted his empire, that were low indeed, that were an ignominy and shame beneath this downfall, since by faith the strength of gods and this imperial substance cannot fail, since, through experience of this great event, in arms not worse, in foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war, irreconcilable to our grand foe, who now triumphs, and in the excess of joy sole reigning holds the tyranny of heaven. So spoke the apostate angel, though in pain, vaunting aloud but racked with deep despair, and his bold compeers soon answered him. O Prince, O Chief of many throned powers, that led the embattled seraphim to war under your conduct, and in dreadful deeds fearless, endangered heaven's perpetual king, and put to proof his high supremacy, whether upheld by strength, chance, or fate. Too well I see and rue the dire event that with sad overthrow and foul defeat has lost us heaven, and all this mighty host in horrible destruction laid thus low, as far as gods and heavenly essences can perish, for the mind and spirit remains invincible, and vigor soon returns, though all our glory extinct, and happy state here swallowed up in endless misery. But what if he our conqueror, whom I now of force believe almighty, since no less than such could have overpowered such force as ours, has left us this our spirit and strength entire, strongly to suffer and support our pains, that we may so suffice his vengeful ire, or do him mightier service, as his thralls by right of war, whatever his business be, here in the heart of hell to work in fire, or do his errands in the gloomy deep. What can it then avail, though yet we feel strength undiminished, or eternal being to undergo eternal punishment? To which the archfiend replied, Fallen cherub, to be weak is miserable, doing or suffering, but of this be sure, to do any good will never be our task, but always to do evil our sole delight, as being the contrary to his high will whom we resist. If then his providence out of our evil seeks to bring forth good, our labor must be to pervert that end, and out of good still to find means of evil, which oft times may succeed, so as perhaps shall grieve him, if I fail not, and disturb his inmost counsels from their destined aim. But see! The angry victor has recalled his ministers of vengeance and pursued back to the gates of heaven. The sulphurous hail, shot after us in storm, has laid the fiery surge that from the precipice of heaven received us falling, and the thunder, winged with red lightning and impetuous rage, perhaps has spent his shafts, and ceases now to bellow through the vast and boundless deep. Let us not miss the opportunity, whether scorn or satiated fury yields it from our foe. Do you see that dreary plain, forlorn and wild, the seat of desolation, void of light, save what the glimmering of these livid flames casts pale and dreadful? Let us head there from off the tossing of these fiery waves. Their rest, if any rest can harbor there, and reassembling our afflicted powers, consult how we may henceforth most offend our enemy, how to repair our own loss, how to overcome this dire calamity, what reinforcement we may gain from hope, if not what resolution from despair. Thus Satan, talking to his nearest mate with head uplifted above the wave, and eyes that sparkling blazed, his other parts besides, prone on the flood, extended long and large, lay floating many a rood, in bulk as huge as those whom the fables name of monstrous size, Titanian, or earthborn, that warred on Jove, Briareos or Typhon, whom the den by ancient Tarsus held, or that sea beast Leviathan, which god of all his works created huges that swim the ocean stream. Him, perhaps, slumbering on the Norway foam, the pilot of some small night-foundered skiff, deeming some island, often, as seamen tell, with fixed anchor in his scaly rind, moors by his side under the lee, while night invests the sea, and wish for morn delays. So stretched out huge in length the arch-fiend lay, chained on the burning lake, nor would he have ever risen or heaved his head, but that the will and high permission of all-ruling heaven left him at large to his own dark designs, that with repeated crimes he might heap on himself damnation, while he sought evil to others, and enraged might see how all his malice served but to bring forth infinite goodness, grace and mercy shown on man by him seduced. But on himself treble confusion, wrath, and vengeance poured. Immediately, he raises his mighty stature from the pool. On each hand, the flames driven backward sloped their pointed spires, and rolled in billows, leave in the midst a horrid valley. Then with expanded wings he steers his flight aloft, incumbent on the dusky air that felt unusual weight, till on dry land he lands, if it were land that ever burned with solid, as the lake with liquid fire, and such appeared in hue, as when the force of subterranean wind transports a hill torn from Pelorus, or the shattered side of thundering Etna, whose combustible and fueled entrails thence conceiving fire, sublimed with mineral fury, aid the winds, and leave a singed bottom all involved with stench and smoke. Such resting place found the soul of unblessed feet. Him followed his next mate, both glorying to have escaped the Stygian flood as gods, and by their own recovered strength, not by the sufferance of supernal power. Is this the region, this the soil, the climate, said then the lost archangel, this the seat that we must change for heaven? This mournful gloom for that celestial light? Be it so, since he who now as sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right, farthest from him is best, whom reason has equaled, force has made supreme above his equals. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors! Hail, infernal world! And now, profoundest hell, receive your new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder has made greater. Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty has not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice to reign is worth ambition though in hell. Better to reign in hell, than serve in heaven. But why let our faithful friends, the associates and co-partners of our loss, lie thus astonished on the oblivious pool, and not call them to share with us their part in this unhappy mansion, or once more with rallied arms to try what may yet be regained in heaven, or what more lost in hell? So Satan spoke, and Beelzebub answered him. Leader of those bright armies, which but the omnipotent none could have foiled, if they once hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope in fears and dangers, heard so often in worst extremes, and on the perilous edge of battle when it raged, in all assaults their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive, though now they lie groveling and prostrate on the fiery lake, as we erewhile, astounded and amazed. No wonder. Fallen from such a height. He scarcely had ceased when the superior fiend was moving toward the shore, his massive shield of ethereal temper, large and round, behind him cast. The broad circumference hung on his shoulders like the moon, whose orb through optic glass the Tuscan artist views at evening from the top of Fiesole, or in Valdarno, to descry new lands, rivers, or mountains in her spotty globe. His spear, to equal which the tallest pine hewn on Norwegian hills, to be the mast of some great admiral, were but a wand he walked with, to support uneasy steps over the burning marl, not like those steps on heaven's azure, and the torrid climate smote on him sore besides, vaulted with fire. Nevertheless he endured till he stood on the beach of that inflamed sea, and called his legions, angelic forms, who lay entranced, thick as autumnal leaves that strew the brooks in Vallombrosa, where the Etrurian shades high overarched embower, or scattered sedge afloat, when with fierce winds Orion-armed vexes the Red Sea coast, whose waves overthrew Busiris and his Memphian chivalry, while with perfidious hatred they pursued the sojourners of Goshen, who beheld from the safe shore there floating corpses and broken chariot wheels, so thickly strewn, abject and lost, lay these, covering the flood, under amazement of their hideous change. He called so loud, that all the hollow deep of hell resounded, princes, potentates, warriors, the flower of heaven, once yours, now lost, if such astonishment as this can seize eternal spirits. Or have you chosen this place after the toil of battle to repose your wearied virtue, for the ease you find to slumber here, as in the valleys of heaven? Or in this abject posture have you sworn to adore the conqueror, who now beholds cherub and seraph rolling in the flood with scattered arms and ensigns, till soon his swift pursuers from heaven gates discern the advantage, and descending tread us down thus drooping, or with linked thunderbolts transfix us to the bottom of this gulf? Awake, arise, or be forever fallen. They heard, and were abashed, and up they sprung upon the wing, as when men found sleeping on duty by those they dread, rouse and bestir themselves before fully awake. Nor did they not perceive the evil plight in which they were, or feel the fierce pains, yet they soon obeyed their general's voice innumerable. As when the powerful rod of Amram's son in Egypt's evil day waved around the coast, called up a pitchy cloud of locusts, warping on the eastern wind, that hung like night over the realm of impious Pharaoh and darkened all the land of Nile. So numberless were those bad angels seen hovering on wing under the vault of hell, between upper, nether, and surrounding fires, till, as a signal given, the uplifted spear of their great sultan waving to direct their course, they landed on the firm brimstone, and filled the plain, a multitude, like which the populous north never poured from her frozen loins to pass the Rhine or the Danube, when her barbarous sons came like a deluge on the south, and spread beneath Gibraltar to the Libyan sands. Forthwith, from every squadron and band, the heads and leaders hurried where their great commander stood, godlike shapes, and forms excelling human, princely dignities, and powers that once sat on thrones in heaven, though their names are now blotted out and erased from the books of life by their rebellion. Nor had they yet among the sons of Eve gained new names, until wandering over the earth, through God's high sufferance for the trial of man, they corrupted the greatest part of mankind by falsehoods and lies to forsake God their Creator, and transformed the invisible glory of Him that made them to the image of a brute, adorned with pompous and golden religions, and adore devils as deities. Then they were known to men by various names and idols through the heathen world. Muse, tell their names then known, who first and last roused from the slumber on that fiery couch at their great emperor's call, and came one by one where he stood on the bare strand, while the mixed crowd stood yet aloof. The chief were those who, from the pit of hell roaming to seek their prey on earth, dared fix their seats long after next to the seat of God, their altars by His altar, gods adored among the nations round, and dared abide Jehovah thundering out of Zion, throned between the cherubim, yea, often placed within His sanctuary itself their shrines, abominations, and with cursed things His holy rites and solemn feasts profaned, and with their darkness dared affront His light. First, Moloch, horrid king, besmeared with blood of human sacrifice, and parents' tears, though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud, their children, as cries unheard, passed through fire to his grim idol. Him the Ammonite worshipped in Rabbah and her watery plain, in Argob and in Bazan, to the stream of utmost Arnon. Nor content with such audacious neighborhood, he led the wisest heart of Solomon by fraud to build his temple right against the temple of God on that shameful hill, and made his grove the pleasant valley of Hinnom, Tophet thence and black Gehenna called, the type of hell. Next Chemos, the obscene dread of Moab's sons, from Aroer to Nebo, and the wilds of southmost Abrim, in Hezbon and Haranaim, Sion's realm, beyond the flowery dale of Sibmah clothed with vines, and Eliel to the asphaltic pool. Peor his other name, when he enticed Israel and Sittim on their march from Nile, to do him wanton rites, which cost them woe. Yet thence his lustful orgies he enlarged even to that hill of scandal, by the grove of Moloch homicide, lust hard by hate, till good Josiah drove them thence to hell. With these came they who from the bordering flood of old Euphrates to the brook that parts Egypt from Syrian ground, had general names of Baalim and Ashtaroth, those male, these female. For spirits can assume either sex, or both, so soft and pure is their essence, not tied or manacled with joint or limb, nor founded on the brittle strength of bones, like cumbersome flesh. But in what shape they choose, dilated or condensed, bright or obscure, can execute their airy purposes, and fulfill works of love or enmity. For those, the race of Israel often forsook their living strength, and left his righteous altar empty, bowing lowly down to bestial gods, for which their heads as low bowed down in battle, sunk before the spear of despicable foes. With these came Ashtoreth, whom the Phoenicians called Astarte, queen of heaven, with crescent horns, to whose bright image Sidonian virgins paid their vows and songs nightly by the moon, in Zion also not unsung, where her temple stood on the offensive mountain, built by that uxorious king, whose heart, though large, was beguiled by fair idolatresses and fell to idols foul. Tammuz came next, whose annual wound in Lebanon allured Syrian damsels to lament his fate in amorous ditties all a summer's day, while smooth Adonis from his native rock ran purple to the sea, supposed with blood of Tammuz yearly wounded. The love tale infected Zion's daughters with like heat, whose wanton passions in the sacred porch Ezekiel saw, when by the vision led, his eye surveyed the dark idolatries of alienated Judah. Next came one who mourned in earnest, when the captive ark maimed his brute image, head and hands lopped off in his own temple on the Grunselledge, where he fell flat, and shamed his worshippers. Dagon his name, sea monster, upward man and downward fish, yet had his temple high reared in Azotus, dreaded throughout the coast of Palestine, in Gath and Ascalon, and Acheron and Gaza's frontier bounds. Him followed Rimmon, whose delightful seat was fair Damascus, on the fertile banks of Abana and Pharpar, lucid streams. He also was bold against the house of God. A leper once, he lost and gained a king, Ahaz, his foolish conqueror, whom he drew to disparage and displace God's altar for one of Syrian mode, on which to burn his odious offerings, and adore the gods he had vanquished. After these appeared a crew who, under names of old renown, Osiris, Isis, Horus and their train, with monstrous shapes and sorceries abused fanatical Egypt and her priests, to seek their wandering gods disguised in brutish forms rather than human. Nor did Israel escape the infection, when their borrowed gold composed the calf in Oreb, and the rebel king doubled that sin in Bethel and in Dan, likening his maker to the grazed ox, Jehovah, who, in one night, when he passed from Egypt marching, equaled with one stroke both her firstborn and all her bleeding gods. Belial came last, than whom a spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, or more gross to love vice for itself. To him no temple stood or altar smoked, yet who more often than he in temples and at altars, when the priest turns atheist, as did Eli's sons, who filled with lust and violence the house of God? In courts and palaces he also reigns, and in luxurious cities, where the noise of riot ascends above their loftiest towers, and injury and outrage. And when night darkens the streets, then wander forth the sons of Belial, filled with insolence and wine. Witness the streets of Sodom, and that night in Gibeah, when the hospitable door exposed a matron, to prevent worse rape. These were the prime in order and might. The rest were long to tell, though far renowned, the Ionian gods, of Javan's issue held gods, yet confessed later than heaven and earth, their boasted parents, Titan, heaven's firstborn, with his enormous brood, and birthright seized by younger Saturn, he from mightier Jove, his own and Rhea's son, like measure found, so Jove usurping reigned. These, first known in Crete and Ida, thence on the snowy top of cold Olympus ruled the middle air, their highest heaven, or on the Delphian cliff, or in Dodona, and through all the bounds of Doric land, or who with Saturn old fled over Adria to the Hesperian fields, and roamed the utmost isles over the Celtic. All these and more came flocking, but with looks downcast and damp, yet such that obscurely showed some glimpse of joy, to have found their chief not in despair, to have found themselves not lost in loss itself, which on his countenance cast a doubtful hue. But he, recollecting his usual pride, with high words that bore semblance of worth not substance, gently raised their fainting courage and dispelled their fears. Then he commands that, at the warlike sound of trumpets loud and clarions, his mighty standard be raised. Azazel claimed that proud honor as his right, a tall cherub, who forthwith unfurled from the glittering staff the imperial ensign, which high advanced, shone like a meteor streaming to the wind, with gems and golden luster richly emblazoned, seraphic arms and trophies. All the while, sonorous metal-blowing martial sounds, at which the universal host sent up a shout that tore hell's concave, and beyond frightened the reign of chaos and old night. In a moment through the gloom were seen 10,000 banners rise into the air, with orient colors waving. With them rose a huge forest of spears, and thronging helms appeared, and serried shields in thick array of depth immeasurable. Anon they moved in perfect phalanx to the Dorian mood of flutes and soft recorders, such as raised to height of noblest temper heroes old arming to battle, and instead of rage deliberate valor breathed, firm and unmoved by dread of death to flight or foul retreat, nor wanting power to mitigate and allay troubled thoughts with solemn touches, and chase anguish and doubt and fear and sorrow and pain from mortal or immortal minds. Thus they, breathing united force with fixed thought, moved on in silence to soft pipes that charmed their painful steps over the burnt soil, and now, advanced in view, they stand, a horrid front of dreadful length and dazzling arms, in guise of warriors old with ordered spear and shield, awaiting what command their mighty chief would impose. He darts his experienced eye through the armed files, and soon traverses the whole battalion, views their order, their visages and stature as of gods, their number last he sums. And now his heart swells with pride, and hardening in his strength, he glories, for never, since man was created, met such embodied force that could merit more than that small infantry warred on by cranes, though all the giant brood of Phlegra with the heroic race that fought at Thebes and Ilium, on each side mixed with auxiliary gods, and what resounds in fable or romance of Uther's son, surrounded by British and Armorican knights. And all who since, baptized or infidel, jousted in Aspremont, or Montalban, Damascus, or Morocco, or Trebizond, or whom Biserta sent from the African shore when Charlemagne and all his peers fell at Fontarabia. Thus far these beyond compare of mortal prowess, yet observed their dread commander. He, above the rest in shape and gesture proudly eminent, stood like a tower. His form had not lost all her original brightness, nor appeared less than archangel ruined, and the excess of glory obscured, as when the sun newly risen looks through the misty horizontal air shorn of his beams, or from behind the moon in dim eclipse disastrous twilight sheds on half the nations, perplexing monarchs. Darkened so, yet shone above them all the archangel, but his face bore deep scars of thunder, and care sat on his faded cheek, but under brows of dauntless courage and considerate pride, waiting revenge. Cruel his eye, but cast signs of remorse and passion, to behold the fellows of his crime, the followers rather, far other once beheld in bliss, condemned now forever to have their lot in pain, millions of spirits for his fault cast out of heaven, and from eternal splendors flung for his revolt. Yet faithful they stood, their glory withered, as when heaven's fire has scorched the forest oaks, or mountain pines. With singed tops their stately growth stands bare on the blasted heath. He now prepared to speak, whereat their doubled ranks they bent from wing to wing, and half enclosed him round with all his peers. Attention held them mute. Thrice he attempted, and thrice, despite his scorn, tears such as angels weep burst forth. At last words interwoven with sighs found their way. O myriads of immortal spirits! O powers matchless, but with the Almighty! And that strife was not inglorious, though the event was dire, as this place testifies, and this dire change, hateful to utter. But what power of mind, foreseeing or predicting, from the depth of past or present knowledge, could have feared how such united force of gods, how such as stood like these, could ever know repulse? For who can yet believe, though after loss, that all these powerful legions, whose exile has emptied heaven, shall fail to reascend self-raised, and repossess their native seat? For me, be witness all the host of heaven, if counsels different, or danger shunned by me, have lost our hopes. But he who reigns monarch in heaven, till then secure, sat on his throne, upheld by old repute, consent, or custom, and put forth his full regal state, but still concealed his strength, which tempted our attempt and wrought our fall. Henceforth, his might we know, and know our own, so as not either to provoke or dread new war provoked. Our better part remains to work in close design, by fraud or guile, what force did not achieve, that he no less at length may find, who overcomes by force, has overcome but half his foe. Space may produce new worlds. There went a rumor in heaven that he intended to create a generation favored equal to the sons of heaven. Thither, if but to pry, shall be perhaps our first eruption, thither or elsewhere. For this infernal pit shall never hold celestial spirits in bondage, nor the abyss long under darkness cover. But these thoughts must mature with full counsel. Peace is despaired, for who can think submission? War, then, war open or understood, must be resolved. He spoke, and to confirm his words, out flew millions of flaming swords, drawn from the thighs of mighty cherubim. The sudden blaze far round illuminated hell. Highly they raged against the highest, and fiercely grasped their arms, clashing on their shields the din of war, hurling defiance toward heaven's vault. Nearby stood a hill whose grisly top belched fire and rolling smoke. The rest shone with a glossy scurf, a sign that metallic ore was hidden within, the work of sulfur. Thither, winged with speed, a numerous brigade hastened, as when bands of pioneers with spade and pickaxe armed, prepare the royal camp to trench a field or cast a rampart. Mammon led them on, Mammon, the least erect spirit that fell from heaven, for even in heaven his looks and thoughts were always downward bent, admiring more the riches of heaven's pavement, trodden gold, than aught divine or holy else enjoyed in beatific vision. By him first men also, taught by his suggestion, ransacked the center, and with impious hands rifled the bowels of their mother earth for treasures better hidden. Soon his crew opened a spacious wound into the hill and dug out ribs of gold. Let none admire that riches grow in hell, that soil may best deserve the precious bane. And here let those who boast in mortal things, and tell of Babel, and the works of Memphian kings, learn how their greatest monuments of fame, and strength, and art, are easily outdone by reprobate spirits, and in an hour, what in an age they, with incessant toil and innumerable hands, scarce perform. Near on the plain, in many cells prepared, that underneath had veins of liquid fire sluiced from the lake, a second multitude with wondrous art founded the massy ore, separating each kind, and skimmed the bullion dross. A third as soon formed within the ground of various mold, and from the boiling cells by strange conveyance filled each hollow nook, as in an organ, from one blast of wind, to many rows of pipes the sound-board breathes. Anon out of the earth rose a huge fabric like an exhalation, with the sound of dulcet symphonies and sweet voices, built like a temple, where pilasters round were set, and Doric pillars overlaid with golden architrave. Nor did it lack cornice or frieze, with bossy sculptures engraved. The roof was fretted gold. Not Babylon, nor great Alcaro, such magnificence equaled in all their glories, to enshrine Belus or Serapis their gods, or seat their kings, when Egypt with Assyria strove in wealth and luxury. The ascending pile stood fixed in stately height, and soon the doors, opening their brazen folds, revealed within her ample spaces, over the smooth and level pavement, from the arched roof, pendant by subtle magic, many rows of starry lamps and blazing cressets, fed with naphtha and asphaltus, yielded light as from a sky. The hasty multitude, admiring, entered, some praising the work, some the architect. His hand was known in heaven by many high-towered structures, where sceptred angels held their residence, and sat as princes, whom the supreme king exalted to such power, and gave to rule each in his hierarchy, the bright orders. Nor was his name unheard or unadored in ancient Greece, and in Italy men called him Mulciber. How he fell from heaven they fabled, thrown by angry Jove sheer over the crystal battlements. From morning to noon he fell, from noon to evening, a summer's day, and with the setting sun dropped from the zenith like a falling star, on Lemnos, the Aegean isle. Thus they related, erring, for he with this rebellious rout fell long before, nor did he escape by all his engines, but was headlong sent with his industrious crew to build in hell. Meanwhile, the winged heralds, by command of sovereign power, with solemn ceremony and trumpets sound, throughout the host proclaimed a council to be held at Pandemonium, the high capital of Satan and his peers. Their summons called from every band and regiment by place or choice the worthiest. They anon with hundreds and thousands trooping came. All access was thronged, the gates and porches wide, but chiefly the spacious hall, though like a covered field, where champions bold rode and armed, and at the Sultan's chair defied the best of pagan chivalry to mortal combat or joust with lance, swarmed thick, both on the ground and in the air, brushed with the hiss of rustling wings. As bees in springtime, when the sun with Taurus rides, pour forth their youthful population in clusters, they fly to and fro among fresh dews and flowers, or on the smooth plank, the suburb of their straw-built citadel, new rubbed with balm, discuss their state affairs. So thick the airy crowds swarmed and were pressed together, until the signal given, behold a wonder! Those who seemed in bigness to surpass earth's giant sons, now shrank to less than the smallest dwarfs, in narrow room throng numberless, like that pygmean race beyond the Indian mount, or fairy elves, whose midnight revels, by a forest side or fountain, some belated peasant sees, or dreams he sees, while overhead the moon sits arbitress, and nearer to the earth wheels her pale course. They, intent on their mirth and dance with jocund music, charm his ear, his heart rebounds with joy and fear. Thus incorporeal spirits reduced their immense shapes to smallest forms, yet remained numerous amidst the hall of that infernal court. But far within, in their own dimensions like themselves, the great seraphic lords and cherubims sat in close recess and secret conclave, 1,000 demigods on golden seats, frequent and full. After a short silence, the great consult began.